what you would have seen if you would have seen any of this television media business in the last 24 hours. What would your thoughts be, Paras?
You know, I think the weirdest thing that has happened is I think what we earlier called yellow journalism has become actually the format of normal journalism across TV networks. And I don't mean any disrespect to anyone, but that's true. Because a lot of what we're actually seeing on networks today, the average millennial like myself is actually not consuming the news via television anymore. We're actually normally now taking news from social media. We're getting a lot of our news information. We are getting a lot of the information, but we're probably reading it as opposed to watching it. But when we're also putting up content on, say, an Instagram where they're talking about stuff, everything today becomes more interesting because we don't want to talk about the real stuff. The Assam floods barely got any coverage across media. In fact, we put up I have a show called Are Suna Hai Kya with Paras Tomar. And in that show, we were talking about the fact that how, the talk about the Atmas is so much, we love Mr. Bachchan, but I don't need to know what he's having for breakfast. I honestly don't need to know. I'm glad they didn't get into the fact that whether he uses a liquid hand wash or normal soap to wash his hands. But the fact of the matter is a lot of the content we're watching on the news channel seems more, sometimes more frivolous than what we're actually on my own content. And I realized that oddly enough,
but who do I hold responsible? But Paras,
you.
But I want to bring in Yash on this one. Why hold us? Why hold us responsible? Why not? Why should we not hold the viewer responsible for this?
100%.
Why should I not say to the viewer? That's why I'm saying. The viewer expects this. What I think is crap, which goes all around. The viewer expects it. The TV channels dish that out.
And sometimes,
how do you move on with this, Paras, then?
Sometimes when we put up videos also which have a lot of information and content, that video doesn't go viral. If I'm just shirtless and I'm holding some random juice, that video goes viral at about 4-5 billion views. So you're absolutely right. It is a demand and supply thing. Exactly what happens with the news networks happens with us, and it's true. In fact, that's why we very often saying that if our audience becomes more discerning, we will also make content which is actually content.
Should a news channel be looking for solutions to maybe become the hub of innovations, become the hub of talking about innovations? Can that work, Paras, for you?
I love how you said a news channel looks to aspire to inform and inspire. What is incredible from the time that I was a journalist, and that was a few years ago now, we're now, as entertainment bloggers, vloggers, YouTubers, directly competing with news channels. I started something called Paras Ki Khabar as a former journalist that has lingered on. The news information that I would give would be entertaining, it would be fun, it would be 1-minute capsules. Those videos would get about 4, 5, 6 million views. Now that was direct competition to a lot of people who said, oh, maine aapki khabar dekhi thi, where they're actually watching the news that Paras is giving them, who seems like he's a friend, he seems like, is somebody who you actually know. What's incredibly changed in the last 4 or 5 years is the way that social media has now been perceived. Now today when you're seeing a Paras, you're seeing him giving you information, you're seeing him giving you entertainment. I'm teaching you recipes. Just yesterday I put up a video about sexuality. This morning I put up a video about making a smoothie. We talked about what was actually happening in the current scenario of news. So what's happening is, because we're directly competing with networks now, we're also doing what you just talked about. We're also inspiring, we're also informing. Now, the difference here is the fact that I think a journalist, everyone looks up to you. They look at you in a very different way. You guys are unreachable. For people like us, they say, hey, I know this guy. I've seen him in his house everywhere. He's sitting in his singlets every day and giving me the news. So I think for us, the relatability is definitely much higher. And I think that new media has possibly made a challenge for news channels, because I think now what happens is they're trying very hard to also compete with content like mine. And we've been aware there are times when we're on networks where that network might get about, say, 2-3 lakh views, but our videos are getting views in millions. And I think maybe in order to compete with us, and I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, the news channels are perhaps falling into that rut.
No, I'd love actually, Paras, I'd love to figure out, if you were to put a chunk of this conversation on your YouTube channel, and if you were to ask your viewers, your loyal fans, if you were to ask them, what do they make out of this conversation? I'd love to hear what they make out of this, if an honest assessment is made. And I'm really trying to be as honest as I can, as honest as I possibly can. I'm really trying to create a paradigm and create a model where the viewer can determine what kind of content they'd like to see, where the viewer can also come. Why should just me as an anchor or an editor should have the right to outrage? I can outrage against anyone under the sun, right? Sitting here on my chair. Why should a viewer also not have the right? Why should I should not give an open mic to a viewer and say that, fine, you tell me what do you think is wrong with the media. You tell me what should be done, which could be right with the media. Paras, you got a lot of fans, I must say. So we got a lot of callers who are calling in from Mumbai today.